I want to start with a conversation about the New York Times polling. As I have told you, the overwhelming consensus from undecided voters is that they think Donald Trump had a bad debate against Kamala Harris. They think Kamala Harris got the better of Donald Trump, who, by the way, says he's not going to debate Kamala Harris anymore. But those same undecided voters who say Kamala Harris had a better debate than Donald Trump still are leaning towards Donald Trump after the debate. As I said yesterday, there's hope. Now, I do have to tell you, I got an email from someone. I don't want to name and shame the emailer who means well in the email, but I gotta just, I want to read you the email, and then I'll tell you how I replied, just so you understand. Here it is. Read Kim Strassel's column in the Wall Street Journal. Your outlook on the debate has been way too pessimistic. You are analyzing the debate according to 90s and early 2000s politics with all the silliness about debate failure because you take the bait. People today, with all the insane social media, expect someone to defend themselves in a debate. What many folks saw was that Trump was not a yelling bully like the 16 and 20 debates, while Harris delivered a lot of words, but none were memorable. Don't analyze politics using 90s logic. Update yourself and have more optimism. John, I appreciate your email, but as I replied back to you and said, there are people to this day who insist that actually Joe Biden had a good debate against Donald Trump. Joe Biden actually had a good debate against Donald Trump. We have people today who are convinced that ABC News gave Kamala Harris the questions in advance. Now, they have no proof of this. Someone on Twitter claims that they have an affidavit. They are an anonymous account claiming they have an affidavit. We'll see. I don't believe that ABC News needed to give Kamala Harris the questions in advance, in large part because the questions were that obvious. Do you believe people are better off today than they were 4 years ago? Please explain to us why Donald Trump sucks. I mean, first, the people went with she's wearing an earpiece that can project a speaker into her ears to give her the answers. And now they pivoted to actually ABC gave her the questions in advance. ABC didn't need to give her the questions in advance because the questions were so obvious. I could have predicted in advance the questions ABC News was going to ask. They were that obvious. All of this is the fact that people are going to these conspiracy theories is an admission against interest. They think Donald Trump had a bad debate or that Kamala Harris had a good debate. You wouldn't have to believe ABC fed her the answers if you thought that Kamala Harris had a terrible debate. So, no, you got to find a way to convince yourself, why did she have a good debate? Well, obviously, ABC gave her the answers. Why did Donald Trump have a bad debate? Well, obviously, Kamala Harris had people speaking to her in her ear. All of the conspiracy theories are an admission against interest. Donald Trump didn't have a good debate. John, back to your email, and you're looking at this from an old lens. No, the hell I'm not. I'm looking at this through the undecided voter polling, the undecided voter focus groups, the undecided voters who all said no. Kamala Harris got the better of Donald Trump, but you're all hanging on to the debate being bad and trying to pretend that it wasn't, to distract yourself from the larger point that the undecided voters say Kamala Harris had a great debate and they still don't like her. And that gets to the larger point. While everybody's distracted, trying to conjure conspiracy theories to convince themselves that what they saw wasn't true, just as Democrats try to convince themselves with conspiracy theory that Joe Biden actually wasn't a demented moron. The reality is undecided voters are absolutely convinced Kamala Harris beat Donald Trump in the debate, and they do not care. And that has been my point since the debate. It's not going to matter. You don't need to spend your mental energy conjuring up conspiracy theories and lies when it doesn't matter. Why doesn't it matter? Because undecided voters are furious about the economy, and Kamala Harris couldn't answer the very first question. The fact that you believe that Kamala Harris was given the questions and she couldn't even answer the first question shows you to be an idiot. If you actually believe she was given the questions in advance. Because if she was given the question in advance, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? The fact that she couldn't answer the question, despite being fed the question in advance, according to you, means you're an idiot. And yes, I do want to be very clear here. If you believe Kamala Harris was given such obvious questions in advance and the fact that you believe she didn't do good means you actually are the idiot. Maybe just accept the fact that Kamala Harris had a good debate, Donald Trump had a bad debate, and it doesn't matter. Here's why it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because undecided voters still are furious with the Biden administration. And as I've been telling you for a while now, and in particular since the debate, this is an election about angry people, and angry people do not preserve the status quo. I don't know why people need to spend the mental energy to pretend that Kamala Harris cheated when she couldn't answer the damn question. And that is coming back to bite her. So don't be distracted. Pay attention to the facts. She was asked an easy, obvious, predictable question. Do you believe people are better off now than they were 4 years ago? She refused to answer it in that first question at the debate, and her answer is having monumental, lasting implications for her that are not good for her. It's why Donald Trump can still win the election. If you don't believe me, listen to this from Mika Brzezinski, who's talking to the New York Times reporter, who is explaining why it is undecided voters came away from the debate both thinking Kamala Harris did better than Donald Trump, and they still don't like Kamala Harris. Listen to Mika. I'm not even going to play you the reporter necessarily. I'm going to play you Mika Brzezinski.
Voters said they were glad she has a tax and economic plan, but they want to know how it will become law when Washington is so polarized. They know she wants to give assistance to first-time home buyers, but doubted that it was realistic. And Jeremy, I ask you, is their answer Donald Trump? Because I guess I see the questions. I think there was only so much that she could do in that debate in order to be as effective as she was. And I agree. There are a lot more questions. Of course, I would love to ask Kamala Harris about her leadership style and her plans and how she plans to execute. But are those undecided voters saying, I'm going to kind of lean Trump here because I want change? I don't get it.
Yes. Yes, they are. Mika, you too are being an idiot today. Yes, I know you people on the left hate Donald Trump. In your little protective bubble in New York and Washington and the Acela corridor, what you can't acknowledge is that there are people in the heartland of America who are furious because while you're making 7 figures expressing surprise on MSNBC, they're making 5 figures trying to figure out how to pay for groceries that they didn't have to worry about when Donald Trump was president. So yes, yes, yes. These voters are thinking Donald Trump. Why? Because they didn't like him when he was president, but they weren't struggling to pay for their groceries. The fact that this is going over people's head is actually the Achilles heel of the Democratic strategy in this election. They are such in a bubble. They do not understand Trump voters. They do not like Trump voters, and they cannot imagine there is a pool of undecided voter out there right now thinking of voting for Donald Trump because they think Donald Trump is the second coming of Hitler. Listen to the conversation on MSNBC. They despise these people.
He's a narcissist, right? And so his whole thing is to have a complete lack of compassion and empathy for everybody else. It's all about him. That's why he lies about 9/11. It's all about him, me. He's probably the least compassionate president we've had in 200 years since Andrew Jackson. And it works for him because his supporters are just as ungenerous and have just as little compassion and empathy for others.
You got that? His supporters have just as little compassion and just as little empathy. They are awful people. Why would you want to vote for him? You want to vote for him because groceries weren't as expensive when he was president. Trump supporters, I want you to listen to me right now. You don't like me and you're mad at me. Listen to me right now. You don't have to spend your time building a mountain of lies and conspiracies about Kamala Harris being fed the answers or the questions. You don't have to spend your time worried about did she have an earpiece in and they were feeding her the answers. Her answers were platitudes and the questions were obvious. All you have to understand is that the debate doesn't matter because Kamala Harris was asked the very first question when all 67 million people who watched, they tuned out over time. 67 million people started watching that debate. And the very first question was the most obvious question that was going to be asked. I could have told you, you could have told yourself, you all knew this was going to be the first question. Vice President Harris, are people better off today than they were 4 years ago? And she couldn't answer the question. And that is having a lasting impact, a lasting, damning impact on Kamala Harris's campaign. And Mika Brzezinski is absolutely clueless. Are these people really going to go for Donald Trump and Eli Mistel and the rest of them on MSNBC? He's a horrible person and his voters are horrible people. How could you undecided side with him? Very easy. Because they don't care about Donald Trump's attitude. They don't care about his mean tweets anymore. What they care about is that when Donald Trump was president, groceries were cheap. And with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, groceries are expensive. And when given the opportunity on a national stage, standing against Donald Trump to tell people how she's going to make them better off, Kamala Harris couldn't answer the question. And that is why, from here on out, all 53 remaining days of this campaign, every day, Donald Trump needs to say she's been there for 3.5 years and she hasn't done it. How can you believe she's going to do it next year? And you know what? If he does that, he's going to win. And no Democrat will see it coming because no Democrat outside their bubble can understand how it is that people don't like Kamala Harris. They love her inside their bubble, but you know what? They make 7 figures, so it doesn't really matter for them. What matters is in Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin and Georgia and North Carolina and Arizona and Nevada, people are struggling to buy groceries to feed their families. And they don't care that Kamala Harris seems nicer than Donald Trump. Her policies suck. And people are pissed. Welcome back. It's Erick Erickson here. The phone number, 877-973-7425. If you text ARMY, A-R-M-Y, to 33777, you can fill out your name, zip code, email, so that as we head into your area of the country, we'll be able to let you know we're there. Y'all, I keep going back to this. It should be possible in a world where you're capable of keeping multiple thoughts in your head to recognize her debate was better than his, which is why he didn't want to do it anymore. But also, she didn't answer the questions. And undecided voters were trying to see this. And you need to just understand this dynamic. I don't care about your theory because you're not right. I actually am right in this. Now I'll get angry emails from boomers telling me I'm too arrogant. Well, I'm right. Voters don't like Donald Trump, but they like his policies. So they weren't going into this debate to see if they liked Kamala Harris. They were going into this debate to see if they liked her policies. And she didn't deliver. And so they're willing to go with the guy they don't like because they remember what it was like when he was president. Every single person who is going to vote this November was alive, around, and paying attention when Donald Trump was president of the United States. And you know what? They liked the policies. And they're willing to go back to Donald Trump's administration because their gas was cheap and their groceries were cheap and the world was not on fire. They don't care about liking him now. They've had 4 years of a guy they thought they liked, and look what happened. He got 13 people killed in Afghanistan and wrecked the economy. So they'll go with Donald Trump. Now, I want you to go with Eden Pure and their Eden Pure Thunderstorm to clean the air in your house. All you have to do is go to EdenPureDeals.com, EdenPureDeals.com. Put in the discount code ERICK3, ERICK3. You'll get 3 Eden Pure Thunderstorms. You'll save $200. You'll get them for less than $200. EdenPureDeals.com. So they're an air purifier. They get rid of the dust. They get rid of the pollen. They get rid of the stuff floating in the air. They use electrostatic plates, so you don't have to have the filter subscription. But importantly, they wipe out odors, and they really work. I travel with one. I had to use one last night. I was staying at a very nice hotel last night. But the people next to me were smoking in their hotel room, not tobacco. It stunk. The Eden Pure Thunderstorm took care of me. I was able to use it. This morning, I found, stuff on the carpet in the, we'll get into that later, pet peeve. Nonetheless, the Eden Pure Thunderstorm took care of me. I plugged it up into the wall and it wiped out the odors. It can do it for you as well. EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code is ERICK3, ERICK3 at EdenPureDeals.com. Clean the air today. Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome back. It's Erick Erickson here across the nation. The phone number is 877-973-7425. If you want to be on the program this Open Line Friday, happy to have you. As always, text Erick, ERICK, to 33777. You get the live stream, the podcast, the show notes, all that stuff. We got to talk more about the non-citizen voting. Now, I want to be real clear here. I am not talking about illegal aliens, although it would not surprise me to find out some illegal aliens attempted to vote in this country. What I am talking about is non-citizens, that is, legal aliens, legal residents of the country who are not American citizens. Under the rules of the federal government and the laws of the United States, you must be a citizen of the United States to vote in a federal election. CNN is a network that prides itself on truth-telling. Whether you or I like it or believe it, they are a network that says they don't engage in disinformation, they don't engage in misinformation. Republicans in Congress are advancing the SAVE Act, which would expand existing federal law. Under the laws of the United States right now, it is against the law for a non-citizen to vote in federal elections. But at the local level, in some progressive areas, they are allowing non-citizens to vote in local elections, which I personally think should be unconstitutional, but they've gotten away with it so far. In the process, they register non-citizens to vote. They are supposed to give the non-citizen a ballot that does not have federal races on it. CNN has had on 2 Democrat secretaries of state to tell us non-citizens are not voting. It's a lie. Here is one, the Nevada Secretary of State.
I think. What do you think is going on? So why are these, if the evidence is not there, why are they bringing it up, in your view?
I think it's an opportunity to confuse the voter. You know, we know these conspiracy theories, lawsuits exist. Unfortunately, I think the legal system has become a weapon to discourage people from participating in their democracy, which is unacceptable. We need to ensure that every Nevadan has a voice and that their voice is heard. We know Nevada is a battleground state. We're a purple state. We know our vote is going to matter in this presidential election. And I think the more chaos they can create, the more confusion they can create, will do what we are not trying to do. I wish they would take all this energy and put it into voter education and talking about the issues that are important to Nevadans.
That's the Nevada Secretary of State. This is the Michigan Secretary of State. Also, I think with Jim Acosta on CNN.
Only U.S. citizens can vote in our elections. That's the law of the land. And in every state, we work to make sure that law is realized. We prosecute anyone we find breaking the law, not just in that, but in other ways. And we also track the data. You can't register to vote in Michigan or get a driver's license without showing some documentation, which reveals whether you're a citizen or not and protects us against unwittingly registering people who aren't citizens. So our processes are secure, and you'll find that across the country. The real impact of these allegations is to harm people's confidence in our election system and make them distrust the process. And that's the point I tried to make to Congress yesterday.
So Jim Acosta on CNN had on 2 Democrat secretaries of state from Michigan and Nevada to claim that non-citizens cannot vote in federal elections in this country, and that's a lie. That's the law, but it's a lie. There have actually been multiple documented cases in this country, including in the swing state of North Carolina, where non-citizens have actually voted in federal elections. That's the truth. You may not like that truth. You may want to dismiss it and say, well, Erickson, it was only a few. They didn't affect the outcome of the election. But you can't say it doesn't happen, which is what they're trying to do. CNN should correct this record. They should, because it is an absolute ascertainable fact that non-citizens have voted in federal elections in multiple states in this country, and non-citizens were able to get on voter registration rolls in several states in this country. And CNN has had on 2 secretaries of state from 2 different states to say that's impossible, does not happen, and this is designed to scare people about the integrity of the process, when in fact it's the God's honest truth. For a network that prides itself on telling the truth, whether you like it or not, CNN perpetuated a lie. And that's the truth. The truth of the matter is, as Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have opened the border and flooded even more illegal aliens into this country, and in some cases, like in Springfield, Ohio, given them legal residency in this country, you're going to see more register to vote, and you're going to see more people who aren't supposed to vote in federal elections be able to vote in federal elections. That's the whole point of the SAVE Act. It is currently against the law in this country for non-citizens to vote, but it's not enforced under federal law. What Chip Roy, the congressman from Texas, dear friend of mine, what his SAVE Act would do is it would enforce it. It would allow private enforcement mechanisms to sue boards of elections that allow non-residents or non-citizens onto the registration rolls. It would require that states take affirmative steps to make sure that when someone registers to vote, they actually are a citizen. It's not hard to do. Georgia, my state, does it, as do a number of other states, where when someone registers to vote, they provide their identifying number, which is their Social Security number. And that is run through very rapidly the Department of Homeland Security, which very rapidly turns around the result saying yay or nay, this person is a citizen or not a citizen. If it flags them as a non-citizen, they're told they can provide proof of their citizenship, otherwise they can't vote. It's a very easy thing to do. The fact that Democrats are going out of their way to lie tells you that they have plans to allow non-citizens to vote. And you cannot deny that because, in fact, in multiple parts of this country, progressives have allowed non-citizens to begin voting in local elections. This shouldn't be controversial. You do have to wonder, why is it controversial? Why is it controversial to say we should be ensuring the integrity of our rolls and ensuring that non-citizens aren't registering to vote? It's not a slow process, by the way. It's a very quick ping of a federal database that happens in Georgia when you register to vote. You put in your Social Security number, and it pings that database. Speed of light technology. Literally, it is the transmission of electrons, of ones and zeros at the speed of light to a database that bounces back. And it says, this person's Social Security number matches a citizen, or, this person's Social Security number does not match a citizen. Please provide us more information showing that you're a citizen. It shouldn't be a controversial thing at all. So why is Jim Acosta on CNN putting Democrat secretaries of state on television to tell us what is actually happening is not happening? Why lie? I don't know. Other than they really do want non-citizens to vote. They tell us Republicans are trying to scare people into believing something that's not true, except it is true. You know, Republicans want you to believe that Democrats engage in mass voter fraud. There is always proof of voter fraud, just as there is always proof that illegals or non-citizens rather are voting. Never has anyone been able to show it in such an amount to throw off an election. I know some of you think 2020 was stolen. Did a charity event last night. There were a couple of people there very insistent 2020 was stolen. I disagree. Regardless, Republicans like to claim there's mass voter fraud. Democrats like to claim there's mass voter suppression. There is no evidence of mass voter fraud in this country. There's no evidence of mass voter suppression in this country. It's what both sides do to both rally their bases and intimidate the other side. It's a tactic in an election to try to shape who turns out to vote, on both sides, by the way. Democrats screaming about voter suppression, they are convinced Republicans are trying to get people not to vote. Look what happened. I mean, you all remember nationally, Joe Biden and a bunch of other Democrats, Jim Clyburn and others, said that it was Jim Crow 2.0. Georgia, after the 2020 election, passed a voter integrity piece of legislation, got Major League Baseball to boycott the state and deprive them of the All-Star game in the state over what they said was Jim Crow 2.0. You know what happened after supposed Jim Crow 2.0? The number of black voters turning out actually went up. The number of people participating in the election went up. The ease of the election system went up. The ability of people to get processed quicker went up. trust in the election system because they now got a paper ballot to look, it went up. And yet the Democrats to this day insist it was voter suppression. The Democrats to this day say it's Jim Crow 2.0. Despite the data, more black people voted, more Hispanic people voted, the voter participation went up, and the Board of Election rolls got cleaned up. When Democrats get on television, however, and tell us that it is a lie to say non-citizens are voting, they need to explain how it is so many non-citizens voted in North Carolina, registered to vote in Arizona, voted in other states as well. Because it's an ascertainable fact. It is not in dispute. Non-citizens have voted in multiple elections in multiple states in this country and, in fact, got their ballots counted in federal elections in states like North Carolina, which is a swing state. They can't do that. They just want to tell you it didn't happen. Is it any wonder people are willing to believe conspiracy theories when our elected officials are lying to us with the help of news networks? Is it any wonder people are willing to believe the worst conspiracy theories because when they see elected officials go on a network like CNN, which prides itself on combating disinformation, misinformation, they're allowed to lie with an anchor like Jim Acosta with no pushback. He believes, like them, that no non-citizens have voted in federal elections. He believes it. But what he believes isn't true. The people at that network, I'm sure, believe it. It's like the fact-checking, Lindsey Douglas and David Muir at the ABC debate. They corrected Donald Trump multiple times, and all of their corrections were false. All of their corrections were false. But they and the left believe these things. And because they and the left believe these things, we are told to believe these things, and they're simply not true. And that festers conspiracy theories. It makes people not believe the truth. It makes them conjure conspiracy theories like someone says there's an affidavit of a whistleblower that on ABC News they fed Kamala Harris the questions. Yes, someone claims there's a whistleblower who signed an affidavit. What no one has produced is the affidavit or the whistleblower. They're just saying it. Until such time, you shouldn't believe it's true. And also, the questions were blindingly obvious, and her answers were terrible. So how did she give such bad answers if she was given such obvious questions? But people want to believe the conspiracy theory. And who really can blame them when you got Jim Acosta having secretaries of state on television to lie about the fact that non-citizens can't vote, when in fact in multiple states it's true they have voted? You can't really blame them at that point. Hello there. Welcome across America. The phone number is 877-973-7425. I hope you got blue skies wherever you are because it's pouring down rain outside where I am. Joe Buck, the sports commentator. I feel horrible for him. So he's married to Michelle Beisner Buck, and he shattered her ankle with a golf ball. This is such a wild story. So they were playing golf together. For the record, my wife will not only not play golf with me, she won't even sit in the golf cart while I'm on the golf course. She says she doesn't need to hear my language. So they're playing golf in Mexico. They're at the tee box together. She is standing in front of him for good luck. She does a headstand. And then as he is teeing off, she does a split in the air and her leg crosses the plane of the golf ball as he's teeing off, and it hits her ankle and shatters her ankle. Sad thing is I can kind of see this in my head. Charlie is thinking he must have really shanked it. No, she was in front of him just off to the side, and when her legs did a full split out, her ankle came directly in front of the ball as he was teeing off and got her full force in the ankle and shattered it. Wow. There was a rumor that he had committed spousal abuse or something, and nope, that's not it. Not it at all. They were playing golf together. They were on the 10th hole. He said, how about I do one more golf ball and we'll go get something to eat? And she says, yes. Decides to do a headstand and a split. And, well, that's the end of that. Gosh, What a way to end a golf game. Although, I do have to say, having been hit in the head with a golf club by my son, at least she remembers everything, because I, to this day, do not remember about a week plus of my life from getting hit in the head with a golf club. Now, I did not get hit in the head with the backswing. I got hit in the head with the full forward force of a 7-iron from my son. And on the side of my head, I still have the divot with the scar. I keep my haircut's kind of short, and you can kind of see the divot there. But nonetheless, golf injuries, there's something. Although not like the Dolphins injury. By the way, has anyone noticed that the Thursday night games they give to Amazon Prime, they all suck? Like even last year, the commentators, who was it? It was Herb Street and what's his name? Was it Al Davis on? They were complaining about the quality of the games last year. This year, they all suck. They all suck. The Thursday night games are worthless. But last night, you got to see the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins get a concussion as he ran headlong into another player, and they lost. The Dolphins lost. This hour of the program brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. Wherever you are nationwide, if you're in the business of business and you're buying a building, if you're buying a franchise, if you're buying out a partner, buying out a competitor, you need a heavy equipment loan, you need $50,000 or more, reach out to First Liberty. They might be able to help you. They make their own lending decisions, and they've been doing this since the 90s. First Liberty Building and Loan, their website, firstlibertyga.com. Spend 10 minutes with them, see if you're a good fit for them, see if they're a good fit for you. Firstlibertyga.com. All their contact info is there. When we come back, we got to talk about, well, raw domestic public policy. We got to talk about the boring business of the national debt. However, there's actually big news. For the first time, our payment on debt service has crossed $1 trillion. $1 trillion. That's a very big deal. And also, the U.S. and Great Britain are meeting today and could very well accidentally start World War III. I'll explain it to you when we come back and take your phone calls. The U.S. Treasury Department is now reporting that our debt service payments are now over $1 trillion a year. We are very rapidly getting to the point that our national debt service payments, just the interest on the debt that we got to pay, exceeds the amount of money that we pay for our military. And historically, when countries get to that point, they begin to decline. There is a way to fix it. But first, we need to acknowledge this is a bipartisan problem. Republicans only care about the debt and deficit when Democrats are in charge. Historically, the best spending deals, and it pains me to say this, but the best spending deals have been when a Democrat's been in the White House and a Republican Congress has been on the other side. Bill Clinton and the Republicans in Congress in the 1990s actually balanced the federal budget. It's the last time they did a budget that balanced. Taxes went up a little bit, frankly, but the budget balanced. And we were not adding to the national debt. When Barack Obama was president, it was the conservatives in the House of Representatives that forced everyone, including their own party leadership, to go along with the what was it? Oh, now it escapes me. But they had a plan, sequestration. That's what it's called, sequestration. So the Republicans had a plan where the Democrats had to agree with the Republicans to actually cut the size and scope of the federal government. All right, y'all, I got a package being delivered from FedEx, and I'm the only person here, so I got to sign it live on the radio. You guys get to witness this. Thank you very much, by the way, for coming. Not a problem. Thanks. I'm the only person in the office expecting a package today, and here I am live on the radio having to sign the FedEx package because I couldn't wave the signature on it. So, nonetheless, quick and easy. FedEx is awesome. But So Republicans and Democrats, when Barack Obama was president and Republicans were in Congress, agreed on sequestration. Contrary to what you might have been told, sequestration was not a reduction in the growth of future spending. You know, that's what typically happens in Washington, is they agree to cuts, but they're cuts to future growth in spending. Sequestration was actually real-time cuts to existing growth in government. So actually the size and scope of the federal government went down. The problem some people had is that it cut defense. Sequestration, Republicans and Democrats could not agree on where to cut or how to cut, so the agreement was to cut everything. But it worked. We're going to have to go to something like that because here's the problem. Our national debt is growing so large that at some point, taxes on everybody, including the middle class, have to go up because you won't be able to cut government enough. We are still within a window where you can begin to cut government in order to solve the problem. So how does this work? Well, you remember a fraction. Remember a fraction. Fraction has a numerator and a denominator. A numerator and a denominator. So our national debt as a fraction of gross domestic product, the debt is now beginning to exceed our gross domestic product. So put the debt on top and the GDP on the bottom. The GDP is the denominator. The debt is the numerator. Now, what some people think we should do is we should reduce the numerator by throwing a lot of money at the national debt and shrinking it. No, sirree, Bob. What you do is you grow the denominator, the gross domestic product. You expand the size of the economy, and then suddenly the debt as a percentage of the economy does not exceed the economy. Now, let me put this in more practical terms to you. We talk about pies in this country, growing the pie economically. Let's talk about the fixed size pie. The fixed size pie is the total economy between the government and the private sector. If you want to grow the denominator, grow the gross domestic product in this country, expand the economy so that the debt as a percentage of the economy is less than 100%. You got to grow the denominator. You got to grow the underlying economy. In order to grow an economy economically, liberal and conservative economists would all agree, you have to shrink the size of the government. As the government shrinks, the share of the private sector grows. As the private sector grows, remember, a private sector is always more efficient in spending than a public sector. Why? Because a public sector is command and control. We have a federal government where Congress says you're going to spend this much on this. In a private sector, it's arm's length transactions that can be renegotiated as things change dynamically, so money is spent more efficiently. So as the private sector grows, the economy grows. And as the economy grows, the debt to GDP ratio begins to shrink. And as the economy grows, it produces more tax revenue. And as the economy produces more tax revenue, that tax revenue can then be fed into a federal budget to then reduce the deficit every year. Now, let me explain the deficit and debt for those of you who don't know the difference. Every year, Congress runs a deficit. Our expenditures exceed our income. At the end of the year, if the deficit still exceeds income, if we still have a deficit, that deficit then rolls over into the national debt. And our national debt is the total annual deficit compiled over time. You want to shrink and get rid of the deficit, you have to reduce the size of the government and increase tax revenue. You grow the economy without raising taxes. You've grown the economy. You've increased money to the federal government. Why? Because there are more people making more money. So even if taxes haven't changed, more people making more money, their percentage of income goes up, their amount of money they pay in taxes goes up. The other thing you do, you begin to shrink the size of government, start cutting government. You can cut government programs. You can cut salaries of people in government. Not a lot of money there, but you can do it. You begin to whittle down the size and scope of the federal government, get it back to its core functions, which you're going to have to do. You've reduced the cost of government. You've expanded the private sector. The expanded private sector begins to produce economic growth. Between the reduction in the size and scope of the federal government and the increase in the private sector and the efficiencies of the private sector, it increases tax revenue to the government. You begin to pay down the national debt. And what have you done? You haven't raised taxes. You've just shrunk the government. And you've stimulated the economy. This is a hard truth for people to understand, particularly on the left. When you grow the government, you shrink the private sector. The private sector spends money more efficiently than the public sector. As the public sector grows and becomes more burdensome, it's harder for the private sector to innovate. In particular, it's harder for small businesses. Big businesses and wealthy people use the complexity of a big government as an advantage against small businesses and the middle class. But here's the dirty little secret. Democrats don't actually like the middle class. Democrats like the billionaires because the billionaires are almost all of them donors to the Democratic Party. But Democrats in their socialist-oriented thinking, their communist-oriented thinking, the bourgeois are bad. And the bourgeois, who are the bourgeois? The bourgeois are not the billionaires. The bourgeois are the middle class. They're the farmers who own the land. They're the shopkeeper who owns the means of production in the economy. They're the bad guys because they're the ones who are presumed to hoard the capital. The billionaires and the poor are who the Democrats like. The poor because they'll vote for them for their social welfare spending. The billionaires love the Democrats because they keep government complex as a subsidy to the billionaires. So you got to fight the Democrats in order to cut government. When you cut government, it simplifies government. And when government gets simple, the middle class resources are freed up to compete in the private sector against the billionaires because the middle class no longer has to hire lawyers and lobbyists to compete to navigate an overly complex system. The efficiencies of the money begin to be spent in the private sector, which grows the private sector, which grows the economy, which generates more tax revenue, which pays down the national debt, which gets the national debt service payment less than $1 trillion a year. This is not hard. This is not rocket science. I went to law school to avoid math, and yet even I know this. Everyone knows this. But what you have to have is politicians with a will to cut the government. Now, this is a problem for Republicans right now because Republicans have become big government too. The Republicans becoming big government Republicans want to grow government to award their friends and punish their enemies in the same way Democrats do. The solution for Republicans is actually to take the ring of power and throw it in the volcano and melt it. Destroy the government as it is. Scale back the powers of Washington. Reduce the size and scope of the government. Here's the problem for the GOP. Every time Democrats get elected, they are willing to lose their election to grow the government. Look at Obamacare. They all went down in flames in 2010. Republicans had the biggest sweep since the 1800s. But the Democrats locked in Obamacare and played it for keeps. Republicans need to do the same in reverse. Get rid of the government and play for keeps that way. You get rid of the government, you get rid of their power, you reduce the government, you expand the economy, you get rewarded by the voters for growing the gross domestic product of the private sector, and they return you to office because you've made government make sense again and you've made the middle class competitive. Republicans just lack the will to do it because once they get power, they're scared to death of losing it. And because of that, they lose it every time. The phone number is 877-973-7425. I want to pivot off the phone call there and Joe Biden being wrong about so much because Joe Biden and Keir Starmer, who is the Prime Minister of Great Britain, who's in Washington right now, they're on the verge of probably starting World War III if they're not careful. I want to step back and paint a broader picture for you that you need to understand. The Norwegians are sounding the alarm. In northern Norway, there have been a series of incidents where supposed tourists have been showing up near military and intelligence installations and surveying them, cutting cables, doing all sorts of things that are questionable. Now, you should know that Norway shares a border with Russia. Above Finland, Norway wraps around above Finland. And up there near Murmansk in Russia, they share a border. There are NATO surveillance facilities. Cables have been cut. Soldiers have been targeted. There are lots of Russian tourists in the area. And the Norwegians are deeply concerned. But not only that, the Americans, the British, the French, and the Germans are sounding the alarm that Russian submarines are apparently hovering around undersea cables. So, if you don't know, for a lot of reasons related to physics and the speed of light, it's actually easier to route it's easier to route electronic communication through undersea cable than it is via satellite. It's faster. Now, why? Let's say you're going up 1,000 miles, you come back down 1,000 miles. In the process, you've got to route through a satellite. You got to route through two different systems on Earth. You got to go up. You got to go down. A undersea cable actually, one, takes the satellite out. Two, is oftentimes a shorter distance. And three, it processes faster because there's less of a buffer. Now, why is that? Well, part of the problem with a satellite is in addition to its height in the atmosphere. And by the way, I always get people who claim to know more than me, who oftentimes don't, lecturing me in what I'm saying. For those of you who want to bang away at your keyboard to try to correct me, your email is going to go in the trash and you're going to get blocked for this reason. I know I'm not an expert, but I also know how to talk to the experts. And I'm trying to do some basic explanation to people who don't need your in-depth 5,000-word explanation, to try to explain to people something to simplify to them. So spare me your email and your know-it-allness. I understand you know more than me and you want me to know more than you. All I'm trying to do is explain the basics to people to make a larger point. So spare me your email, please. Thank you. Now, for those of you who aren't the experts and you just want to know the basic understanding of what the problem is, we have a lot of undersea cables around the world. We started with undersea cables before we were putting satellites in space with data. Also, a lot of the satellites we use in data, they're not in low Earth orbit. They're higher in orbit than, for example, Elon Musk's Starlink. So in many cases, our transmission up there and back is a further distance than just going from New York to London on the cable. In addition, because of the buffering, because you got to point the satellite dish at the satellite, it needs to be somewhat precise, as you know if you have DirecTV, and then back down, it can be problematic. So we spend a lot of our time transmitting through undersea cable. There are connection points around the world in coastal cities. And the Russians have submarines around major wire transfer points looking like they're going to cut the undersea cables to sever international communication, and in particular, to sever communication between the United States and Europe quickly. If you sever the undersea cable between the United States and Europe, how do you have to get the messages there? Well, it's got to go around the world the other direction. It's got to go from New York to Los Angeles to Honolulu, Honolulu to Shanghai, Beijing, Tokyo, Seoul, somewhere like that, across where? This big mass of land called Russia, where there are cables that they can tap into and snoop if the traffic all has to go the other direction. Or you send it by satellite, and the Russians have mastered shining lasers at the satellites to disrupt their ability to get information. That's why the undersea cables are so important. They transmit faster with less buffer and are more reliable than the satellite communication. So if you cut it off, all our information has to either go around the world the opposite direction via Russia or has to go via satellite, which can be disrupted. So now here's this. This is the whole point of all of that. The Americans and the Russians obviously not getting along. Same with the rest of NATO. We maintain we are not at war with Russia. The Russians increasingly believe we are at war with them. Like it or not. So now the Prime Minister of Great Britain and the President of the United States are meeting in Washington to decide whether or not Ukraine should be allowed to use long-range missiles into Russia. The Russians are saying this is an act of war. The Russians, like the Chinese, are already at war with us. The Chinese, you should know, they're at war with us. The Chinese are at war. Now, we're used to thinking about war in terms of bullets and bombs. The Chinese and the Russians are engaged in digital warfare against us. Take, for example, the federal indictment last week of the people who work for Russia Today, the TV network. They were paying Americans to produce video content to go viral on the internet that advanced messages the Russians thought would be helpful. Now, why? They weren't just trying to advance the Russian message. What they were also trying to do was they were trying to get division in this country. The Russian strategy, contrary to what the Democrats want you to believe, the Russian strategy has never been to advance the election of Donald Trump. In fact, if you read the Mueller report, what the Mueller report has said, and what our national intelligence agencies continue to say, is the Russians do not have a vested interest in getting Donald Trump elected. That's a Democratic talking point, but it's not true. What the Russians have a vested interest in doing is dividing Americans. So to the extent the Democrats are out there yelling at anyone that if you help Donald Trump, you're helping the Russians, that's what the Russians want. They don't want Donald Trump elected. They want the Democrats yelling at Republicans and Republicans yelling at Democrats. So we're so internally distracted hating each other, we're distracted from what the Russians are actually doing. The Chinese are now helping the Russians build their weaponry in Ukraine. And the Chinese are increasingly giving the Russians weapons technology to test against us. Remember, this is one of the things we were doing with Ukraine. We were giving Ukraine older weapon systems, using the purchases to build more advanced weapon systems, and we were testing how our old weapon systems responded to the best of the Russians. And it turns out our old generation technology is actually superior to the bleeding edge Russian technology. And our bleeding edge technology is far more advanced than the Russian technology. So now the Chinese are doing the same thing in reverse. The Chinese are beginning to give increasingly their good technology to Russia so that the Russians can test it in Ukraine against our more cutting edge stuff to see how the Chinese systems fare. And it turns out, by the way, our systems still do very well against the Chinese. The problem for the Chinese is this: they are not battle tested. Every time the Chinese launch an innovative new weapon system, it fails. Their latest bleeding-edge nuclear aircraft carrier caught on fire and cracked in half. Their destroyers shut down at sea inexplicably, not through maliciousness, but through incompetent building. The Chinese nuclear missile arsenal was being filled up not with fuel, but with water. The head of the program was executed for it. Communist systems are less efficient than capitalist systems. The Chinese are now using the Russians to test weapon systems in Ukraine, and they're not going well. The problem is that we're thinking of escalating the situation. I'm all about helping Ukraine stop Russia, and I think we should give them more and better weapon systems. But I'm not so sure we want the Ukrainians using American missiles to bomb Russia. Putin is signaling that would mean war. The problem for us is that Putin says that'll mean war. Putin's already at war with us. Putin's already plotting sabotaging cables. They're already sabotaging communications array in Norway. They're already plotting around the country and the world. And I guarantee you we have sleeper cells in this country right now, Chinese and Russian sleeper cells, just waiting for an escalation. And I just hope Joe Biden and Keir Starmer don't decide to escalate the war. As much as I want to help the Ukrainians, I'm not interested in expanding the war footprint around the world. That, I think, would be foolish for us to do. And I'm a little bit concerned that that may be where they're headed. Now, We got lots of other stuff we got to talk about today, but right now I need to tell you, Fani Willis here in Georgia has had a pretty significant setback in her case against Donald Trump. It's not going so well. The judge in Georgia has moved, thrown out more counts in the Trump election interference case. She also, by the way, says she's going to ignore a subpoena to testify before the Georgia legislature. Good luck with that. But Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee on Thursday struck 3 additional counts from the year-old indictment that alleged former President Donald Trump and more than a dozen others were involved in a felony conspiracy to overturn the election. McAfee concluded the criminal conduct described in the felony counts, which all involved alleged false statements made to a federal court, lie beyond the state's jurisdiction under the Supremacy Clause and must be removed. So the order affects only 2 of the 15 remaining defendants in the case, Attorney John Eastman and State Senator Sean Still. But the judge's findings would eventually apply to the other defendants charged of those counts, including Donald Trump, once the Georgia Court of Appeals lifts a stay impacting the bulk of the case. So the stay, so essentially the district attorney is not allowed to advance the case until a 3-judge panel has considered a request to remove Fani Willis, the district attorney, from the case. So the case has been frozen. There's no action to happen, but there are 32 felony counts in the indictment now. Donald Trump is facing 8 indictment counts. He was originally facing 13, but that drops to 8. This case continues to get worse and worse. All of these cases were presumed to be good cases for the Democrats. I've said all along this one was probably better than the D.C. one, but also not that strong of a case. The only thing Fani Willis has had going for her in Georgia is that Georgia has a very broad RICO statute. So she can take a bunch of different people who did a bunch of unrelated things, claim it's all related to a criminal enterprise, that is to overturn the election, and tie all those things together, and each person can be held responsible for the other person's actions. It's too unwieldy of a case to be prosecuted. And given the shenanigans of how they put it together through the special grand jury process, it's become weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker, and it's going to bleed the taxpayers of Fulton County dry as she tries to advance this case. I don't think it's going to get anywhere, and I would not be surprised. I mean, it can go either way, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Georgia Court of Appeals tosses Willis from the case, just given so many of the allegations against her that have been substantiated in her behaviors in the run-up to this prosecution. We'll see. All right. Plenty more when we come back. We got to get into some of the political news of the day, including Democratic panic beginning to set in over the United States Senate. And also, I do want to talk a little bit about the Laura Loomer situation, because there are a couple of points that need to be made about the people Donald Trump surrounds himself with. I will tell you, if you subscribe to my Substack, you can text Erick to 33777 and get it. My piece this morning was my national syndicated column based on my monologue from yesterday, Dear Donald Trump. And it was advice to Donald Trump. And the basic point of the advice is if you don't stop hanging around with crazy people and focus a little bit more on your election, you're going to lose and you're going to go to jail. So you need to win this thing. I'll get into that and Laura Loomer when we come back. Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. I'm delighted to have you. This is the third hour of the Erick Erickson Show. This open line Friday, the phone number 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I'll take your calls in this segment. But I need to begin with a very important point. There is a lot of talk about Laura Loomer right now. Who is a lunatic who is very close to Donald Trump. And let me just explain this one to you with some background. According to multiple news outlets, Donald Trump wanted to hire Laura Loomer last year. And Susie Wiles, the co-manager of the campaign, along with Chris LaCivita, sat in on the hiring to block it. Lindsey Graham and Marjorie Taylor Greene Diametrically opposed polar opposites of the GOP. They're both telling Donald Trump, you gotta ditch Loomer. In addition to Laura Loomer going with Donald Trump to the debate in Philly, probably, I'm guessing, one of the people who told him about the pets being eaten in Springfield, Ohio. You know, Trump has the way of listening to the last person in the room with him. It's a bad leadership issue that some people have. You listen to the last person in the room. Donald Trump listened to someone complaining about Brian and Marty Kemp before walking on stage in Georgia and attacked the governor and his wife on stage in Georgia. And then he probably listened to someone telling him about pets being eaten by the Haitians in Ohio and went on stage of the debate. And guess what he does? Talks about that. I don't know whether it was Loomer or somebody, but everybody points the finger at Loomer at this stuff. She's a kind of toxic person. She has denied, or she said that 9/11 was an inside job, or she's promoted that. She denies it to CNN, but she's promoted conspiracy theories about 9/11 being an inside job. She has argued or suggested that the 2018 mass shooting in Parkland, Florida, and Santa Fe, Texas were staged. That the attempted 2018 mail bombings that targeted some progressive figures were a false flag operation. Last year, she promoted the video spreading the conspiracy theory 9/11 was an inside job and told CNN Thursday, quote, "I've never denied the fact that Islamic terrorists carried out the 9/11 terrorist attack." Early in her career, she was doing crazy right-wing pranks, including tried to putting a burqa on the Fearless Girl statue in New York City. She's invoked the white nationalist great replacement theory and has claimed apparently she supports a white ethno-state, allegedly. In July, she claimed Joe Biden was dying and final preparations were being made for him. She's a conspiracy theorist. Lindsey Graham has said Marjorie Taylor Greene is right. Laura Loomer is a bridge too far. Laura Loomer has tweeted that the White House will smell like curry and White House speeches will be facilitated via call center in response to a tweet from Kamala Harris about visiting her family in India. Even Marjorie Taylor Greene says that is extremely racist. Here's the thing. If Louis Farrakhan is a bridge too far for any Democrat, someone like Laura Loomer should be a bridge too far for the GOP. It's also a distraction, and it's an unneeded distraction right now. Whether you like her or not, I'm not a fan. Whether you like her or not, having her, given her history of conspiracy theories and other antics, whispering in Donald Trump's ear is not smart right now. He needs to be focused on the economy. He needs to be focused on immigration. He needs to be focused on crime. Laura Loomer whispering crazy things in his ears is not helping. You do not want Louis Farrakhan hanging out with the Democrats. You think it's a terrible sign when Democrats like Barack Obama go hang out with Louis Farrakhan or Reverend Jeremiah or Al Sharpton. If that enrages you, you should be concerned that Donald Trump is hanging out with a right-wing equivalent. She's not David Duke. But I do believe if he hung out with David Duke, some of his supporters would try to defend it. The same way, Laura Loomer is a horrible human being he should not be hanging out with, letting her and her nonsense get in his head when he needs to be focused on the border, he needs to be focused on crime, he needs to be focused on the economy. Donald Trump needs to be focused right now. Because here's the bottom line. Donald Trump is going to go to jail if he loses. They are working very hard to throw Donald Trump in jail. Jack Smith is not giving up that prosecution in Washington, D.C. The judge in New York City has decided to postpone sentencing until after the election, waiting to see what happens. The Democrats want to throw Donald Trump in jail. So I'll read you what I wrote. If you text the word data to 33777, you can subscribe to my Substack. You get a discount if you text data to 33777. Dear Mr. Trump, I've maintained that were the election held today, you would win the election. Kamala Harris is just an extension of the deeply unpopular Biden-Harris administration. A majority of Americans do not like you, but they prefer your administration's policies. The electorate is angry and frustrated. An angry and frustrated electorate does not preserve the status quo, which is Kamala Harris. The last few days, however, have made me rethink who would win. It's not just that your debate performance was not good. It's that ever since the assassination attempt, you've seemed both off your game and cloistered with friends, detaching you from reality. Your convention speech had neither rhyme nor reason. It went on too long and people tuned out. Once Mr. Biden was out of the race, you seemed to lose your interest in the race. It's as if you wanted to beat Biden to prove you could beat him, but now have nothing to prove. You secured your nomination and your leadership of the Republican Party. But now, frankly, if you do not win the presidency, the Democrats will probably cart you off to jail, so you need to win. Despite a poor performance, and before you say you had a good performance, remember that Biden has supporters who even now insist he beat you in that debate. There's cause for hope from your debate. Kamala Harris left a bad impression with undecided voters. Those voters believe she beat you in the debate, but also believe she's too tied to Biden without any real message to pivot from high inflation, high border crossings, and crime. The very first question in the debate was addressed to Kamala Harris, and it was, and I quote precisely, "Do you believe Americans are better off now than they were 4 years ago?" Kamala Harris neither said yes nor no. In fact, she did not answer the question, but acknowledged people can't afford homes or families right now. The Biden-Harris administration did that. Voters know that, so you have an opportunity. For the next 50 days, skip the national press. Go instead to Springfield, Ohio. Spend time with WHIO, highly regarded TV and radio station there. Forget the rumors of people eating pets. Remind people Kamala Harris has been on the job for 3.5 years and has done nothing she said she'd do in the future. Talk about the high cost of groceries. Talk about the city being overwhelmed with immigrants. Highlight the issue. Then hit the road. Go to middle American cities and swing states and spend time with the local news stations. Forget Fox. Ignore CNN. Instead, spend time with the local press and the citizens in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, or Cadillac, Michigan, or Altoona, Pennsylvania. Go to Las Vegas. Go to Winston-Salem. Go to Tucson. Go to Atlanta. Everywhere you go, start and end with where you ended the debate. Your most effective moment in that debate was your very last closing statement that you clearly prepped, unlike your convention speech, where you pointed out Kamala Harris has been there for 3.5 years. She could have done everything she promises to do in the future and has done none of them. Talk about the economy, talk about the border, talk about crime. When the reporters inevitably do their job and they ask you tough questions about 2020, you're not disciplined enough to avoid taking the bait. But you can still say, regardless of 2020, Harris is there now. Look at the economy, look at the border, look at crime. If you were wise, you would spend less time surrounding yourself with people like Laura Loomer and others who whisper to you that all is well, all is not well. But the American people are still willing to give you a chance. You can still win, but you're more interested in talking about the crazy things fed to you by the online world than the real things that people care about and that undecided voters care about. At this point, this has been true for some time. You're not going to pivot. You're not going to change. You're not going to exercise more discipline. But if you don't change your conduct, you're going to go to prison. Your campaign at its highest level is well staffed with competent people. They are not the problem. The problem is who you've surrounded yourself with on a daily basis and what you say. And if you don't fix those things, you're going to lose the election and go to jail. That's what I wrote. I know it was given to him to read. Hopefully it will make a difference. I'm going to go to Gretchen's phone call now. Gretchen, welcome to the Erick Erickson Show. How are you? Waltz. Yeah, I think he will. I hope so, although, so I hope so. And Vance is a great debater. I think he'll be far better than Tim Walz. The problem is that nobody really cares about the vice president. The political pundits give the vice president disproportionate attention. But when you go vote, you're voting for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. You're not voting for Tim Walz or J.D. Vance. A small minority of people are. Not enough to matter. That's the problem. I think Vance will have a great debate. He better have a great debate. Maybe it can mitigate some of the damage that was done in the Trump debate. But again, the damage done by Trump is mitigated by Kamala Harris refusing to answer those questions, particularly the "Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?" I mean, the polling of undecided voters shows, one, they think she did better than him in the debate, and two, they're mad at her for not answering that question. So Trump and Vance both have a great opportunity, and Vance can, but vice presidential debates don't matter that much. Vice presidential candidates don't matter that much. The Democrats, you will notice, have kind of stopped trying to make J.D. Vance radioactive, not because they think they've done enough they can stop, but because they realize it's not really working. Every moment they spend talking about J.D. Vance is a moment they don't spend talking about Donald Trump. In the same way, every moment we spend talking about Tim Walz is a moment we're not spending on Kamala Harris. The VP pick just simply doesn't matter as much. And Trump has a great opportunity after this debate to turn the table on Kamala Harris and simply point out, you never answered the question, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? Because you can't. Because if you say yes, the American people will say you're lying. And if you say no, the American people will wonder why you haven't done anything about it. We have a candidate with a great hand playing it badly and a candidate with a bad hand playing it well in this election right now. And we need the candidate with a good hand to play it just a little bit better. And he can win. Don't count him out. But he needs to focus. If Donald Trump does not win, he's going to jail. That should give him all the focus he needs. Welcome. It's Erick Erickson here across the United States of America. The phone number is 877-973-7425. One more little bit on Laura Loomer, real quick, because there is the feeding frenzy of people who hate Donald Trump saying, he's probably sleeping with her. They're probably having an affair. It's all the buzz online. Clearly, there's something going on. There's a relationship there. Have you seen Donald Trump? Donald Trump has a type. Whether it's his current wife, his former two wives, Stormy Daniels, he has a type. Laura Loomer ain't it. Have a hard time believing this rumor that comes, by the way, from people who despise him. So nope, I don't believe it. I do not believe it. I'm not going to. I don't believe that Kamala Harris was given the questions, and I don't believe that Donald Trump is having an affair with Laura Loomer. Do not believe it. People just want to believe stuff to confirm their priors. I still have a hard time with the people. In fact, I got an email from a guy who says, I'm having to stop listening to your show. I very much like your show, but the fact that you cannot appreciate that ABC gave Kamala Harris the questions means I can't listen to your show anymore because obviously they did. And I'm just thinking, how the hell is it obvious that they gave this woman questions? Because I could predict the questions. She didn't need the questions. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago is a question that I could have told you that they were. And in fact, I did tell you before the debate that was going to be one of the questions. And if they gave her the questions, she'd have had better answers. It's wild that, basically every single one of these conspiracy theories is kind of an admission against interest. Trump didn't do well by people who insist he did very well. Well, really, if he did very well, why are you thinking that she was given the questions ahead of time? You got no proof. You have absolutely no proof. You just are presuming it. Someone on Twitter said something that they have on a whistleblower with an affidavit. Show me the whistleblower. Show me the affidavit. You don't have any of that. You got a cockamamie conspiracy theory to try to say that they gave her very obvious questions and she still couldn't answer them. and she did damage to herself. That's the thing everybody's missing. Everyone who's diving into these conspiracy theories is missing the point. She had a good debate. He didn't, and it doesn't matter because she didn't answer the questions people were hoping she would answer, and that hurt her. Back to Mika Brzezinski and everything else. That's why they're going to lose this. And you know what else they're doing? You know what the Democrats are having to do now? This is kind of funny to me. They've had to go full Hitler to try to scare people, and I don't think it's going to work. Here's Jason Stanley. Of course, he's on MSNBC.
Because you can point out, because it's so obvious that the kind of politics we're seeing, the vilification of immigrants as vermin, as rats, as somehow an existential threat to white Christian dominance, the vilification of LGBT, the book bannings, these are all reminiscent of Nazi policies in the 1930s. And remember, it's not extreme to compare this time in the United States to the early 30s in Nazi Germany. That's well before the Holocaust. So what we're seeing, we see these clear parallels. And so it's inevitable that people will go back right now and say, oh, maybe the Nazis weren't so bad, because they're employing these Nazi tactics. They're employing these Nazi tactics against the targets of the Nazis, against our national minorities, against immigrants.
Yeah, that's right. They've gone full Nazi now. It's full Nazi. Full Nazi. It's got to be the Nazis. Everything's got to be the Nazis. They have nothing, which is why they're doing that. That's the only attack they have on Donald Trump, who, by the way, has done something else. So when Trump said the pet stuff on the debate stage, the press at least had to talk about what was actually happening in Springfield, Ohio. Now, I don't think Trump was playing 4 or 5 dimensional chess there. I think he was just Jar Jar Binksing his way through. But also, he said something else, and you'll notice the quiet around it. You'll notice no one in the press is really probing this, because I think members of the press have realized that it was a lie all along.
She's a liar. She doesn't work at McDonald's. She said she worked at McDonald's, right? Right? She worked at McDonald's and she was working so hard. There's only one problem. She didn't work at McDonald's. She's a liar. Liar.
I think he's right. I haven't seen anything in the same way I haven't seen any evidence that the pets of Springfield, Ohio are being eaten by the Haitians. I haven't seen any evidence that Kamala Harris actually worked at a McDonald's. And the Democrats have been all over this. She worked at McDonald's. She never even wrote about it in her biography. It never came up. It is a new story that was never promoted before. She hasn't even produced a picture. I don't know about y'all, but when you get your first uniform and you're going to your first job with a uniform, your parents take a picture to memorialize that turning point in your life. There's no picture of Kamala Harris in a McDonald's uniform. I actually don't believe she worked at a McDonald's. No one's been able to verify that she's worked at McDonald's. The McDonald's corporate offices, they have no record of her ever working for any McDonald's franchise. She never mentioned it until recently. I think that's something that was made up. I'm happy to be persuaded by the evidence in the same way I'm happy to be persuaded by the evidence that the Haitians are actually eating people's pets or that Kamala Harris was given the pre-screened questions by ABC News. But thus far, there are allegations. There's just no evidence of it. I have some lady yelling at me that one of the people who had been unwittingly subsidized by the Russians is peddling the truth and the documentary evidence of the Haitians eating the pets. No, that's not actually happening. They're repackaging other stuff to make it sound like it was Springfield, Ohio, when it wasn't. People just lying through their teeth, hoping the boomers believe them. Same thing with Kamala Harris at McDonald's. They're hoping the progressive boomers believe them. And, oh, she worked for McDonald's. She's one of us. Prove it. There's no picture. There's no contract. There's no evidence she worked at the McDonald's. If I'm not supposed to take something Donald Trump says as proof without evidence, I'm not going to do the same with Kamala Harris. I'm going to hold both sides to the same standard. And right now, that means she did not work at a McDonald's, that she's lying. Prove me wrong. I will tell you, I've got a lot of friends who are kind of in that camp. In fact, I've got a text chain with some friends right now, the number of them saying, look, I don't like him, but I'm going to vote for him, but I resent being put in this position. There are concurrently a lot of Donald Trump fans who genuinely love the guy, who believe that he had a stellar debate, and we're all got to be in a coalition together. My problem here, Gordon, and I'm going to let you go there. Thanks for waiting. Sorry to interrupt you in your conversation about your toothbrush. That was on me, not you. How do I say this delicately? We're all in a coalition together to support someone against Kamala Harris. But within the coalition of support, there are some who like the guy and some who don't like the guy. What I find is the ones who like the guy are the meanest, angriest people. They're the ones who, despite me saying I want him to win, despite me giving him money, despite everything I say reminding you he can win, despite pointing out undecided voters didn't like his debate performance, but they actually still prefer his policies, and that's why he can win. Despite all of that, because I'm not willing to hump that man's leg like a little chihuahua, I should lose my job. They come after my advertisers. They call my stations and complain. They send me hate mail because I'm not loyal enough. And I do know people. I am not in this camp. I tend not to. I tend to it just bounces. So people are angry, and I get it. Same way with the guys who showed up at my house in 2016 to threaten me and my family. People are like, it didn't happen because you didn't call the cops. No, I wouldn't go call the cops. They were just mad people. They were mad. I disagree with them. I understood their anger. They weren't bad people. They were just mad, and they were taking their anger out on me. So I get it. But I do know friends who are so thoroughly aggravated with these people, they really are at the point where, like, I just hope they lose. I want Donald Trump to win, but I want his supporters to lose. I'm like, nah, you can't be like that. You can't let what other people do. I mean, you got to turn the other cheek. You got to turn the other cheek. God's going to settle this in the end. What I do think is happening, though, right now is that a lot of people are going to see their idols smashed. There are a whole lot of people who are worshiping at the altar of idols in politics, on the left and the right. And eventually, every single one of their idols is going to be smashed. Maybe me too, and I don't see it. Because I know a lot of these people, they don't see that they're worshiping at the feet of idols. But I think if you're that willing because someone online said something and you're just going to rush to believe it, like the Kamala Harris was fed the questions by ABC News. There is no evidence of it. There is one anonymous account on Twitter that said it and it went viral. There is a supposed news account on Twitter that is actually a peddler of misinformation. Like, that's its whole point, is to peddle nonsense and lies that circulated it, and people are retweeting this. And if you're willing to believe that stuff, you are definitely worshiping idols. And they're going to be smashed. And I'll just say provocatively here, I do sometimes wonder if the outcome of this election is going to be whatever does the most to smash the idols of the people who claim to be believers. And if that's the case, well, I don't think the election is going to go the way a lot of us wanted to go if that's the case, because people need to be separated from their idols.